Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Wayne, thank you so much for having me here. You're a wonderful host. We're in your shop, in the office side of your shop. This is really nice, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack. I'm excited to be here. Glad you're able to stop by my shop and see all my crazy plants around here.
You've got a really good setup here, dude. It's very comfortable and very functional.
Yeah, thanks. Now you know I'm actually addicted to plants. So
Yeah. Well, it's good for blooming beds. I mean, that's what you do.
absolutely.
All right. Well, so where I was thinking we'd go with this conversation is like you have an interesting business, and you serve the market, like the turf market, all the same customers. You work with the same customers I work with.
Absolutely.
And you're also a customer.
Absolutely.
It's a nice thing. So I certainly want to talk about that, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about how you got into this. Because how old is Blooming Beds?
Let's see, 2015. So what are we going on? 7-8 years?
There you go.
Yeah. So, I have a passion for plants. I wanted to figure out, how I could kind of enter the market and do something, I don't know, a little different than, a lot of current like landscape companies and horticulture companies are doing today. So, one of the things as a home gardener that I realized was, I could find someone to cut my lawn. I could find someone to put chemicals down. I could even ask my lawn guy to trim my shrubs and all that every now and again. But the one thing I couldn't get people to do is just simple weeding, right? Just taking care of the plants. If I had a question of why a plant didn't look good, I didn't really get any answer.
Mm-hmm.
So, I thought that was an interesting area. And because I kind of like the science part of plants, it was easy to kind of transition there. So, I'll be short with it, but I started experimenting at this time. Compost teas were very popular, so there was a site called the Unconventional Farmer, and they had all these recipes. So I started trying to make my own lactobacillus and all that. So long story short, I was at an expo and just talking to some of the vendors and telling them what I'm doing. They're like, hey, there are products out there that already have the bacillus in there. And I'm telling them my experience is like, hey, I had whole shot on my laurels. I was spraying them on my laurels. The ones I didn't spray got the whole shot. The ones I sprayed did not. Have no clue why, but it was interesting to me. So, that's really kind of how I started to put the business together. So what we do now is we're a pretty comprehensive plant care company. And when I say plant care, when you say horticulture, a lot of people kind of go to design build. There's someone in there designing a garden, designing flower beds and all that, and install the plants, and then they leave. And then someone's got to take care of it, right? Our focus, which I thought was an underserved market, is the care of that, right? So we started out residentially. There are people who spend a lot of money on their landscape, and it's gone, right? First year it looks good, second year a few plants die, third year they're giving us a call saying, hey, can you save some of this? And we just developed a pretty comprehensive program. So our program is just a traditional landscape gardening, weeding, pruning, trimming, and all that. We have an IPM component and we have a fertility component. And what makes us different is we kind of blend that together to really, give a solid quality product back to our customer.
Yeah, well, that's a really good description. You also do some design and install as well, right? You're not just doing maintenance. You do. I mean, at my house, you've done some install.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do. We'll do a little bit of design. We also do interior plantscape.
A lot of what I'm seeing around the office here.
Pretty much. I mean, we have, I probably have 50 plants right in front of you. But, we do some design, but we don't hold ourselves out to be designers, right? Normally, we're looking for a maintenance client, and if a client needs their bed augmented or something like that, then, we can do that with them with no problem. And sometimes if they're bigger projects, we may partner with someone that actually has those design skills. But our main component is really the maintenance. And the good thing about design and maintenance is when you know a lot about that particular plant, then when you're kind of doing design, you already know the problems that particular plant has and all that. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sitting here listening to you and doing a lot of correlation into the turf realm.
Sure.
I'm looking at it through some turf glasses, through some golf maintenance glasses, and it's cool. A lot of your customers are golf courses.
Yeah.
So a lot of what you're talking about in terms of it's nice to have something designed the right way for maintenance. That's something superintendents talk about all the time.
Sure.
And you're able to speak that language or look through it through that lens on all of the horticulture, at the golf course.
Yeah. So it's interesting. To me, golf aligns very well with what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So my one example is, if you're going to have a major design done on your golf course, you're going to hire a company to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you need to change some things around on a particular hole or, some small projects, then a lot of times the superintendent, the head of grounds, those guys can handle that stuff. They have enough knowledge and experience to handle that, right?
That's right.
So it's perfectly aligned. The other thing is, which is very interesting, is the plant science is the same, right? So the schedules in terms of applications and all that, they are almost identical. The difference is on a course you're dealing with maybe 2 or 3 different types of turf, right? And around the clubhouses and all the flower beds, throughout the facility, I may be dealing with 50 or 100 types of plants. So that's a major difference.
That is a major difference. You're right. Yeah. And you can also dip into like trees and bushes and all the different plants around the clubhouse.
Correct. So we focus on ornamental trees,
Mm-hmm.
shrubs, perennials, annuals, ornamental grasses, and all that. So all the ornamental plants that are around the facility.
And then you'll go indoor as well and work on the indoor plants.
That's right. So, we, for our solution is a full solution for country clubs and golf courses, right? So, from an outdoor perspective, superintendents, heads of grounds, and the grounds crew, our goal is to add value back to them by, taking care of the plants around the clubhouse. That way they don't have to send the guy up to the clubhouse to do something on the same schedule. So a great example is around May, at least on the East Coast in New Jersey, all the clubs, their grand openings happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, they're trying to stay on top of their applications, right? You have weather to be concerned about. If fungicides are behind, you're going to get screwed in a month's time, right? You got to get your FERT down. You have to get all that stuff down and be prepared for the open. You want to make sure that your greens are nice, your fairways are nice, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing. So for us, it's the preventative and the
like summer prep applications.
The summer prep applications, the spring applications.
Right.
And this is where we actually interface with your products. So
okay.
One of the things that we do or we'll ask the club to do is like, hey, there's this myth about ornamentals where you say, hey, just put some holly tone down in the spring and forget about it. And we don't do that on the course, right? We know that a sort of like kind of organic fertilizer like that may last maybe 8 weeks, maybe,
mm-hmm.
right?
Or longer, yeah.
Right. So, we're looking at, okay, well, through a life cycle, we'll do 3 or 4 applications, right?
Mm-hmm.
8 to 10 weeks apart, and to make sure that you're constantly feeding those plants and giving them the right environment to grow in and succeed in.
All right, so I love this. I mean, I love your company and I love working with you. And it's really cool to voice this out because, like, there is still a huge need for this. And it's not just golf that you work with. It's kind of any sort of campus grounds, right? Like any sort of, you mentioned hospitals and...
Yep. So that's right. So, again, when I built the business, we wanted to differentiate ourselves. So we look for businesses that are looking for a different level of quality in terms of horticulture, right? Country clubs are interesting because, they're all vying for a customer base, right? And they want, the course needs to be good, but also the first impression driving into the clubhouse, parking, getting ready if it's a member guest to go out and play golf. May not directly correlate, but, they're seeing this stuff.
They directly correlate,
right?
Yeah, they just do,
right?
You're setting the vibe,
correct,
for the location, whether that's golf or any other location. So, all right. So I want to dip back further because you mentioned like just a passion for plants. How did you develop this? Was this from your youth and like? Were you able to use this in previous career or what? How did all this work for you?
It's interesting. It's from my parents. My father was like this guy outside, had to have the best lawn in the neighborhood and all that.
Love it.
My mother has she still has 1 million plants in her house.
Oh, love it.
Some of them.
It's a great place to grow up then, man.
Yeah.
That's great.
So it's interesting that, I was the one that was least interested in plants when I was growing up, didn't like to cut the lawn, just wasn't interested. But, as you grow up, you find, passions and hobbies and, taking care of plants, later on in life was something that I enjoyed doing.
It does create a mood. It creates a vibe, and it's like there's nothing more immediate and direct to lift you up your spirits than to be in a really nice space.
Yeah.
And plants are like, they do that very quickly for you. They bring that to you very quickly.
They do, and it's they've done studies on plants and how it affects people, so everyone kind of knows that if I put a bunch of plants around, it helps clean the air, right? And NASA did a bunch of studies there. There are some other studies of people putting plants in hospitals, right, and tracking the recovery of people when they're kind of on a rehabilitation side of things. And there's a direct correlation with them needing less medicine, being happier and recovering quicker. So I there's been a lot of studies, and there is a direct correlation between, humans and plants, where if you're surrounded, you are in a better mood, you're a better spirit.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So that's how it kind of got going for you. You had this kind of deep, latent passion for plants. You had it on the back burner for a long time, and then second career, it seems like, right?
Yeah. I guess I did. It was probably subconscious, right? Because it was one of those things where you're like, I'll never do this, But no, it's good. We enjoy it. The one thing I would say, in terms of plants and kind of running a business is, our goal is to extract the ornamental value out of plants.
Okay.
Right? And this is how we've kind of built out our program. And you can imagine, go straight back to turf, right? So you can call it turf, grass, seeds, right? And, Rutgers has the turf program. I think Penn State has a pretty significant one. And they travel all over the world looking for different types. They do selection, they do hybridization and all that, right? And if you kind of strip it all back, it's just like, okay, I'm trying to extract in a golf course, I want my greens to roll a certain way. I want, this golf course to play a certain way. And that's why you're making the apps, right? And that's why you're doing all your, your methods in terms of aeration and all that, right? Now you bring it to plants and it's the same thing, right? So in its natural environment, and I usually use rhododendrons because everyone kind of knows what a rhododendron is, right?
Okay, I like it.
In its natural environment, it's an understory plant. It grows under shade trees, right? So if you did nothing to that rhododendron, you'd have a bunch of leaves on top, and I'm sure plenty of people have seen this, and there's nothing on the bottom, it's just sticks, right? And why is that, right? Well, the reason is because the plant's not going to make, leaves underneath if there's no sun. So what we're doing by pruning and fertilizing and all that is we're trying to keep that youthful look of the plant, right? And it's a duration, right? So I always tell, like, hey, look, the ornamental life cycle of plants, it has a life cycle, right? Before it starts to be, hey, is it time to, like, do a complete revamp and swap out some of these plants, because they're going to eventually revert back to what they normally would.
So use the rhododendron as the example. You're saying it will revert back to just getting bushy where it can, grab as much sunshine as it can. There'll be a lot of that plant that has very little ornamental value left, because like it's just stems supporting the one space where it can get some sunlight.
Correct. So what you'll see is you'll start to see, and again, this could be 10 years down the road,
20,
right?
30.
Right.
I mean, you see these plants at people's houses that are definitely, many decades old.
Right. So you'll start to see dieback. This is a great example, right? So you'll have a full plant, and it's big, it's massive, it flowers every year, and then a limb will die back, or you'll start to see that happen, right? And think about it, you're trying to support all of that extra material that you've been able to create, all the leaf material, all that that it needs to support. So eventually it'll start to die back. So you have to play games with these things to try to kind of kick the can down the road. Part of that is fertility, part of that is your IPM solutions, and the other part is doing correct pruning and all that.
I was going to say shaping and knowing where it is in the environment, like sunlight, water, knowing where that plant's located.
Right.
So and shaping, and that's something that's an expertise of yours. Like you've got that's the art side. Like you've got the eye for knowing that space and knowing how to keep this plant youthful, so that it can support where it's going to grow.
Correct.
And I guess that's what you mean by extracting the most ornamental value out of the plant.
That's one, and the fertilizer is another, right? So
okay. So let's talk fert.
So we're feeding our turf grass, right? To get it to grow, and we kind of know we're using PGRs. We're feeding it. We're doing a bunch of stuff to get it to the perfect condition that we want. And you should be really kind of looking at the plant material the same way. The difference is you don't have 200 acres, you may have 100 different plants. So that's where it kind of diverges. But that being said, you need to figure out, in the fall, you're removing all the leaf litter, right, from the plant. So you're removing a process, natural fertilizer process, right? At least on a turf, you have ways of aerating and doing all kinds of extra things. It's a little more difficult to do that in beds.
Yes.
So you have to figure out ways to really, get water down to the roots, get air down to the roots, get, fertilizer down to the roots. And the other thing is, now that I have, so many different plants, they don't all respond to fertilizer the same way, right? You have to be very careful that you don't burn the roots. Even shrubs or big trees, they're delicate compared to, grasses. So, some of the things you can do is biostimulants are huge in this space.
Okay,
right?
great.
Yeah, because you're really more working on the environment and the surrounding environment, microbial activity, more so than just trying to pump NPK into the ground, which you need.
Okay.
But I think it's as important to, get that environment right. And allow the plants to take up what's already existing in there, and then supplement that.
You bring up a really interesting notion that I guess I haven't really put into words, but you're totally right. Like grasses can handle a lot. They can handle a lot of abuse. So you can kind of paint with a pretty broad brush on the grass plant.
Sure.
And it'll probably take it. It'll probably take it. Whereas there's a lot of ornamentals that are far more delicate, that you have to be pretty precise, because you go either off in either direction, you could put some damage on this plant.
Yeah, you can put damage on a plant. You could kind of ruin the ornamental value. a great example is tomatoes, right?
Okay.
I don't know a lot about, the vegetable area, but
Okay.
we know that if you fertilize tomatoes wrong, in the wrong time with a lot of nitrogen, you're going to get a bunch of leaves and no fruit. You need that phosphorus for the fruit, right? So you just screwed yourself up for that season, potentially. And maybe you can play catch up or something like that. But it's the same thing. So if I have a plant that doesn't really respond to fertilizer in an ornamental way, i.e. it's producing foliage. Maybe it just grows and it doesn't produce foliage, or it grows too fast and it gets lanky and it doesn't look that good, right? So you have to figure out, like, okay, how am I fertilizing? There are some plants that you just don't touch, right? They like poor soils. That's where they thrive, right? Some plants that, the sandier the soil or the coarser the soil, that, they do better that way.
They want more air.
Yeah, they want more air. So, yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned fertility, you mentioned biostimulant. And you use EarthWorks. Let's just talk about some of your favorite EarthWorks products,
Sure.
applications, how you use them. Education's based here.
Yeah, I mean, I've been using a 333 and a 101 since I think we
Since
started,
the start,
right?
Yeah.
I think it's a great product in the beds. The way we use it is, we'll start early, April, before the soils really start to warm, and we'll start our first application there, and you can see the difference once that soil starts to warm, with the plant starting to push out growth.
That's right.
Right. So I've been very happy with that, and
So that's a good baseline foundation, and funny enough, it's exactly what the golf courses do. Like, they'll do a spring aeration on the greens,
Yep.
and they'll use those two products.
Yep.
So you're starting much in the same way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The other products I especially like, is the BioVantage. As you know, I probably put in a lot of things. And again, it's because I like the idea, humic acid. I like the idea of putting, microbes back into the soil, right?
Right. You're actually inoculating with the BioVantage.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And most recently, we were using a C3, and the other thing is Trilogy. I like Trilogy. It's a 155. I'm not very. For plant material, I don't need a lot of nitrogen, right? There's, so that 155 is great.
And you're building up your soils well to support nitrogen release. So
Correct.
like you don't need to input that much more outside of what you're doing, building up the root zone.
Right. And then from there, it's plant specific, right? So what I mean by that is, take roses, right? Roses are heavy feeders. They get every disease and insect under the sun, so they're high maintenance.
Heavy feeders, what does that mean?
I mean, if you want a rose to look good, then you're gonna probably get on a feeding schedule, maybe every 14 to 21 days on maybe a liquid foliar fertilizer, on top of my 333-101.
Wow.
And
so so roses are like greens.
Yeah.
Roses are like golf
They
course
are
greens.
the greens.
Yeah.
The golf greens. You're gonna need to, if you really want them to look nice, you're gonna need to get ahead on a fungicide schedule. You want to preempt that. You don't want to wait till June when all the leaves are half gone or turn brown to figure out that you have foliar diseases. This past season we had a ton of rain.
Okay.
And the feedback I got in the middle of summer is everyone, oh, roses suck. I hate roses. And they're not easy plants, right? But you have to get on top of that. You can't get behind on fungicide applications if, again, you want them to thrive and look really nice. And then you're going to need to put an insecticide in there for insect damage. So yeah,
I like to break down look really nice into more buds, like more flowers.
Well, absolutely.
I mean, is that fair? I think that's what I'm after.
So yeah, you're after, again, the ornamental value of that plant. Why is this plant planted here, right? Well, it has red flowers. Do I want a few red flowers, or do I want a lot of red flowers? I probably want a lot of red flowers, or at least my members want a lot of red flowers, right?
Okay, good.
So that means you need to fertilize it, right? You need to understand where you planted it. Are they boggy, soggy soils? Is it very dry soils? And you need to figure that whole thing out, the environmentals. But, you have to do this again. Same thing you're doing on the golf course. You're going to have to fertilize it. You're going to have to use fungicides. You're going to have to at least use insecticides to make sure that your roses are healthy and doing well.
Oh, all right, excellent. Okay, so that's the heavy feeder of the rose. You're on this kind of
Sure.
cycle every 2 to 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Like, if you were, what are the minimalist plants out there, and what's a program for something that you would say requires much less maintenance?
So great example, and it's one of my favorite plants is spirea.
Okay.
They require very little. We don't do
What
any
is spirea? I don't know it.
I mean, it's a shrub.
Okay.
Flowers in the spring. It's pretty common.
I'm sure I do know it.
For sure, you've seen them.
Okay.
They come in a couple different, kind of fuchsia or white or some kind of the color palette there.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not really much you have to do with those plants, right? We do use the 333, the 101 in all the beds.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about it. They very rarely get any insect diseases or aphids or anything like that. Very rarely get fungal diseases. So they just thrive. Again, if you get the environmentals right, there's nothing to do. There's a bunch of plants like that.
Do they like full sun? They like not a lot of water? What like?
Yeah, I mean, full sun is great for those plants. Yeah, they wouldn't like a ton of water, but they're not like going to be in a place where you're going to get a lot of water.
I guess shifting gears a little bit, but I'm on the low maintenance side of things, going into indoor plants.
Sure.
I walked into your shop here, and up at the front in the office area, you've got a lot of good light, and this is where most of your plants are.
Sure.
You mentioned, it's all right. It's X amount of kelvins. What? So throw that out there for me again.
So Kelvin. So light spectrum, right?
Right.
I believe, and don't have a book in front of me, I think it's like 2700 to 6500.
Okay.
And what's interesting is it actually provides different functions for the plant. So it on the lower end of the spectrum, 2700, 3200, that is sunrise and sunset.
Mm-hmm.
That actually helps encourage flowering.
Oh yeah, well yeah, because you need darkness. Like this is the time right after darkness.
Right. So that spectrum of light actually helps encourage flowering for the plants.
Okay,
right?
Interesting.
And then your full 5500, 6500, it's healthy, right? It's bright light.
Vegetative growth,
right? It's just kind of health. You may get some flowers, but that's kind of the spectrum. So if you had a full spectrum kind of scenario inside, which most people don't, or most places don't, you could do a lot with that.
Right. Okay, got it. And if you had control of your light spectrum up and down, you can really manipulate some more.
You can play with it, yeah. You could definitely
get some buds growing, like you know what I mean? Like if you bring it down to the 2700 and throw it on there for a couple hours, and you do that for a couple days, and then bring it back up, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll say this, and this is kind of my own experimentation, and my wife totally just dismantled my experiment, right? But I had a plan, and I had timers, and I had like 3 or 4 different light bulbs, and I had my plant, just to your point, 27 and 3200 for a couple hours in a day, couple hours in the evening.
Okay.
And then I would kind of gradually go up to 5500, which that's the highest I had.
Okay.
And I would have 5500 for about 12 hours. And then it would go back down eventually to the 32 to 2700 spectrum. Then it would turn off.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept it like that. And I had plants that I never seen flower.
Yo!
Seriously.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
This is why I love talking to you, man. Because I love this.
Yeah. But I mean, then you understand why no one likes the flowers. They don't look good, right? So when you see a flower, it's like, oh, okay, this thing is it actually does flower, but it's not an interesting flower.
It's a weird flower.
It's a weird flower type thing, but yeah.
And maybe the ornamental value of that plant for most people is the leaf, is the foliage. Yeah, it's a leaf it puts out. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So, all right, well, that was a good bit of learning there. I also learned something new about you today when I was setting up all this gear, and you were like, you seemed very comfortable with it, and then you told me like, yeah, I got some DJ experience, dude. I got it. So I was like, oh, okay. So because usually, and no knock on all of our illustrious guests, but you're very good with the equipment. That's all I'm saying. You're good with the mic. You're good with the headphones. Was that DJ on the radio, or was that DJ like at a party? What was that?
Let's just say I had a lot of partying going on, high school and just after.
Okay, so fair enough.
Yeah, no, I when I was younger, I used to DJ, carry equipment around. I wanted to be in sound production for a minute, so I used to, get into that and all that. I had boards and stuff like that.
You're a passionate guy. You have passions.
I do.
We're also parked right here next to a little desktop aquarium.
Yes.
And you kind of gave me the rundown of what's going on in the aquarium. One thing that the part I found most interesting was you made the aquarium look nice. You've got some plant life in there.
Sure.
But of course, there's circumstances that come with you change the environment, and unbeknownst to you, you brought in some invasive snails with the plants.
Yeah, and that was a lesson learned. But yeah, and I had to get another snail that eats them. So, the life cycle continues, but
biodiversity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And all right, well, cool. So, let's before we get going, I want to talk a little bit more about Blooming Beds itself, your setup, your company, like how you go to business, who you're after, customer wise, and then like you've got some cool physical stuff in this shop, and your vans are kind of unique and different, and if however much you want to talk about all of that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So again, we look for customers that see value in what we do, and what we do is we provide a quality product when it comes to plant care.
And golf courses, boom. Like you have some great golf customers. I know them. They're great golf customers.
Yeah, I think it aligns very well with golf, for two reasons. One, I can talk to a superintendent, heads of ground guy or whoever, and they get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we start talking fertility, I don't have to have a long speech about what the benefits of fertility is. I don't have to have a long speech about IPM. Right. I don't have to have a long speech about any of that stuff.
Whereas a facilities manager at a hospital, it could be different.
It could be. Again, if the value is, hey, I need these plants, I need my outdoor space to look good around, year round, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least within, that particular season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it starts to make sense, right? Because now you're kind of pulling off of the course, for instance. Again, golf aligns very well, but you have a finite number of people that work for you, and, you have applications to make, and you have to keep that golf course going. And then the schedule is the same. So you're going to be pulling people off the course to take care of, a couple hours here, a couple hours there, to take care of all the beds and all that. If there's a wedding, if there's a member guest, you want to make sure that your guys are doing everything they need to do on a course to get that up and running. So what we do is we, make sure that there's a certain level of quality. And that being said, we have a few different programs for different golf courses and different situations, right? Our three main tiers is we have a fully managed solution where we come in, we are the horticulturists, and we come and do everything from soup to nuts.
Mm-hmm.
We have a client-directed program where we go in and the superintendent those guys will say, hey, Wayne, can you guys focus on this area? And a lot of that is, hey, when you get here, just make sure all the weeds are done. And then, hey, there's an area over here I kind of need you guys to get to and all that. So that works out very well. It also allows them, whenever they have some downtime, to bring their guys back to the clubhouse to do a little bit of work as well. And then
So that's a very collaborative sort of customer.
Very collaborative. It's one of our most popular programs. And yeah, I mean, we work together. So I think from a superintendent perspective, he understands that, or she understands that, the grounds are going to be maintained at a certain level, right? So now if there is a wedding or a member guest or something like that, and they need to send someone to the clubhouse, it's nominal, it's minimal, right? Hey, can you go do these couple of things that, maybe the general manager is asking, versus saying, hey, this place is weedy, and usually it's at the last minute, right?
Right.
So,
It's the last thing we've looked at.
Right. So when you need to be on a course, so that's one of our most popular. And the last thing is just a time and material contract. If someone kind of is in a pinch and they need us to come and give them a hand, and then we work with customers from that perspective as well.
And equipment wise, what are you using? I mean, big rotary spreaders. You mentioned that you have to get creative on kind of aerating, and so like just to enlighten us, like you've got different tanks, you've got different spreaders. How do you do the job?
Yeah, so I look all around. So this is kind of like my off season, so to speak. We're still doing our interior plant care, but things kind of wind down and outdoors, so we have time to kind of look around. Aeration is a tough one, right? A few years ago, we used pitchforks and we went around and tried to just put holes all around the beds, which can become problematic if you have drip irrigation or you have pipes or stuff like that, or things like that in the ground. Electricity for lights and all of those things that you'd have in the beds. I found last year a tool that's really good. It's kind of gets into the soil, and it also kind of turns the top layer of mulch. So we, adopted that last year, and it's been really good, and it actually makes us very productive, so we can kind of get through things pretty quickly, and we can do more than one thing at a time, right? I can be, cleaning up the beds, getting all the old mulch out of there, and turning that top, layer of soil.
Awesome.
And I think, my philosophy in terms of equipment is like, I got to find more than one way to kind of use it, right? So my vans happen to be set up in a way where I can put things in and out. So for instance, if we're doing a planting project and I need to put my little ditch witch, skid steer in there, it can fit in one of my vans. I have a special ramp where that goes in and comes out.
So you have that like walk behind skid steer sort of thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah, got it.
So, again, for planting projects, if we're doing any spraying or deep root, we have a custom spray rig system we had made up for those vans so that they can, again, come in and out. So if we're not using it, we, put it away, clean it up, put it in a shop, and our guys are out there servicing our customers in the same van.
Quick question about the spraying. You mentioned like foliar spraying. Do you foliage and get some drench going down? How do you do it? How does it happen?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really the label, right? So if we're doing a foliar application, it's saying to run off, then you would kind of do something to run off.
Like say the EarthWorks sprays, like C3 or C3 BioVantage Trilogy. How are you using those?
I actually like to use those in a deep root.
Mm-hmm.
I like to get them right in the root zone.
Mm-hmm.
They do work very well foliar from a foliar perspective, but in selecting the best application for that product, I think a deep root is great. Now that said, if I'm doing any sort of remedial kind of health situations, I will do a foliar spray.
You'll hit C3 foliage, Trilogy foliage,
but we'll drench it. I mean,
yeah.
So
you'll get the leaf wet and then let it drip.
So when we say spray to run off, it's like running off. In that way, you're getting a bit of a drench, right? Because you need the soil contact. But at the same time, and I mentioned it to you before, with the BioVantage, there is some efficacy in terms of it being on a leaf tissue as well.
Definitely.
Right? So,
fighting disease. I mean, it's working that way.
I think boxwoods are great examples. We're all living with them, right? And we know that they have a lot of problems.
You
and
planted some at my
diseases.
house.
Yes, I planted some at your house.
because you were matching the design that was there.
Yeah, absolutely. But those are proponents for maybe a foliar application of a C3 or BioVantage or something like that, right? Because it can benefit from that sort of application just on a leaf tissue. Aside from that, we're going to be selective, right? I'm not going to spray something that's pretty resilient, right? Even if it gets some diseases, it's not going to kill the plant. Again, cost, you have to kind of factor in cost and what are you really trying to gain out of it. Is it going to give me something from a ornamental perspective that's different from the way it looks now? If it's nominal, then that's one thing. If it's a health thing, we know we're trying to, get these plants healthy again or something like that, then I'll go back to the foliars. But just as kind of a preventative preparation app for the season, I like to put that stuff in the ground.
Yeah. I mean, that is the way that you let nature do the work.
Correct.
Right? Like you're like putting the pieces out there and then letting nature do the work.
Correct. But you just got to monitor, right? Nature's nature, right? If it's a rainy season, then you have to figure out, well, do I do more apps? How do I manage that? There's going to be more fungal pressure. Do I, change up my formula a little bit, right? So, I mean, again, I keep saying it goes back to golf, but I presumably that's the same exact thing that happens.
It really is. It's very cool because you're right. It's totally exactly correlated. There are total parallels, and like you're showing that it's happening together at the same time, at the same times, at the same location.
Correct.
Same program, same sort of approach.
Yeah. So what we do, and I'll say that you'll see me a lot of times sitting in turf classes. And part of that is because I don't think there is enough educational classes for ornamentals when it comes down to the science, right? It's very rare that you sit in a class that goes into depth about soil testing, right? They may just say
at an ornamental seminar,
right? They'll talk about pH. They won't talk about Keck. They won't talk about calcium magnesium ratios. They talk nothing about that. Why? I don't know.
They talk about design and pruning and achieving the value out of the ornamental, but not via the soil and not that sort of thing.
Right. They don't talk. Right. So where you learn about what can make a hard pan situation, and we have these conversations. I've never sat in an ornamental class that it's gotten that into depth. They give you kind of like a pH range. They'll show you some plants, and you're on your way.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I think that agronomists who are crop and soil scientists are limited by the soil that's there. You have to make the field work.
Right.
That's the field.
Right.
That you have to make that field work. Whereas maybe in this space, there's a thought of well, we'll just build the right bed. We'll just import the right bed. And whereas we don't really have that opportunity. And if they are thinking that, I don't think they're right, because it's the same thing in the landscape bed. This is where the bed is, this is where the clubhouse is.
You can import soil, right? And you can do all the things you want to do with drainage, and 2 years down, you're going to have some spots going to be wetter than another spot. It's just what's going to happen, right? Without getting into too much of the science part of it, right? Underground, you have the cycle of roots that are creating, organic matter. You have frass, you have worm castings,
and you have plants that grow at different rates and grow different kind of root systems, and plants that grow entirely differently, and that affects all of the soil.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Correct.
All right. So you got to work with what's there.
Right.
You got to and to work with what's there, you got to have some kind of model that shows you what's there, or that you can lean on to say, all right, this gives me some glimpse into what's going on under the ground.
Yeah, and the other thing is, in terms of troubleshooting, and this is where I get a lot of my information from, right? And this is why I sit in these classes. If I'm sitting in class and we're talking turf and someone's trying to troubleshoot something, whatever it is, there's probably a good chance there's a correlation to ornamental, right?
Absolutely.
And why not take that and figure out how you can kind of apply it to ornamentals? And that's what I've done with a lot of the fertility, right? I actually, most of my fertilizers are built for golf courses in one shape or form. And I take that and, you know, I'll cut the rate, or I'll figure out like, all right, I don't necessarily need that much nitrogen, but I'm interested in the phosphorus, or I'm interested in a high potassium number.
Or I'm
whatever.
interested in exciting the biology, the soil biology that exists around here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, good deal, dude. I think this was a really informative talk.
Yeah, no, thanks. You know, this is my passion, so I can talk about it all day.
Yeah, I could listen too, man. This is a lot of fun. And yes, you provided a very nice space for us to put this together. So I really appreciate it, dude.
Yeah, thanks for asking me, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
All right, brother. Well, so now let's go get some lunch.
Let's do it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Catch you next time on the EarthWorks podcast.